Newburgh. Okay.
Newburgh, where David Burnett is, by chance.
Nice. How
Pretty
often do you
funny.
see David?
We live right near each other in Manhattan and right near each other up here. I rarely see him.
Yeah, exactly. I saw him in the spring, and that was the first time I saw him in I don't know how long. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, at least he's still traveling all the time and working, and that's something to aspire to.
Yeah. Well, so are you. You've got
True.
a new book coming out.
It's out.
Is it
Came out
out?
September 6th.
Oh, I thought it was October 6th. I thought it was coming out today. Would you have a gallery show, or what do you have next week?
Yeah. I have next week I have a talk in Newburgh, New York,
What's the date on
and
that?
October 12th
October 12th.
in Newburgh, New York at a restaurant called Mama Roo, and
Yeah.
it's called Nightcap Readings. And I'll be giving a slide presentation and talking about my experience, along with the great photographer Meryl Meisler, who will be showing her work. She's also upstate and New York City, and I invited her to join me, and she agreed. So it should be a really fun talk.
That sounds
And,
great.
yeah. And then October 15th is my official book launch at Gleason's Gym in
Nice.
Brooklyn.
Nice.
And I will be joined by Larry Fink.
Nice.
Yeah.
So those are two great events, and they're open
Yeah.
to the public, or
Yes, they're open to the public. And November 3rd is my exhibition opening at Clamp Art Gallery on West 29th Street in Manhattan. And of course, that's open to the public. And I'll be selling books at all three. And of course, the exhibit will have beautiful black and white silver prints and some color prints. It's a small show, like 14 or 15 pictures, but there are two that are 30 by 40 inches and the rest are 16 by 20. And there's even there's one or two that aren't in the book. And um, and at Gleason's, I'll have a couple of big banners hanging of one of those pictures and two of the big pictures from the exhibit. And of course, we'll be talking about our experiences in boxing, Larry and I, and photography. And Bruce Silverglade, the owner of the gym, will talk. So that'll be a boxing experience, and the gallery will be an art gallery experience. So it's kind of fun to do these varied um, types of presentations.
we should probably tell people what the book is about.
Oh, you think? You didn't introduce it. And I don't have a copy right here, do I? Do you? You don't.
I don't have a copy, but we have this thing called FedEx out here where I could have had a copy if somebody would have sent me one. Who's your agent?
um, you can buy them at Powerhouse Books. You could have requested a press copy, or you can buy them on Amazon, but you know how that is.
So Powerhouse
Um,
is a pretty big label. That's nice.
yes. So my book is called Mike Tyson, and it's a book of photographs of my years documenting first a very young Mike Tyson and his rise and kind of his fall. And then the final picture in the book is from 2012 when he did his one man show. So it kind of brings it full circle.
So this is your third book or fourth book? How
Yes.
many? Third
It's
book?
my third, commercially published book.
Right.
And they're all very different. The first one was a portrait of Jewish American women called The Invisible Thread that I did when I was very young and with a writer, Diana Bletter, who was writing about Jewish tradition and exploring um, feminist ideas of observance. And I didn't know anything about it. I just grew up so secular. And we started out photographing the mikvah, the monthly ritual bath, and then it just became a 6-year project published by the Jewish Publication Society. We traveled around the country and met women from all walks of life, and it did really well actually for many, many years. And then I moved on to war, as you know, and I did a book called After War about the effects of war on the men, women, and children who fought in various conflicts in, how many countries was it?
It's got to
30?
be about 30 countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it took me like 15 years. A lot of it paid for by assignments in those regions, by me subletting my apartment and just staying in that region for months at a time and picking up assignments, applying for grants. As the project grew, I got a lot of grants. Um, the Ernst Haas Award, the Eugene Smith Fellowship, NYFA, New York Foundation for the Arts grants, some big foundations. Um, anyway, then I got back to other projects and less about war and more about family, actually, turning the camera on my family and using archives. I went back to graduate school in 2013 and I started working on a project about my brother and his life and his death and his writings, and about sexual identity and AIDS. He died of AIDS in 1996 at 39. And then I started doing a film about my dad, a documentary film that I'm working on. And then when COVID started, I fell into this sad project about my mom, who I was trying to help move. And then COVID happened, and then she was diagnosed with cancer, and her dementia kind of spiraled. So I did, one part of the project is behind me, these still lifes of all these objects that I was packing, and that became an exhibition. But then there's all the pictures of her going through her phases of dementia and in the times we spent together. Um, I lived with her for 3 months in her one bedroom apartment at the beginning of COVID when she was diagnosed, and I couldn't leave her. So I'm working on that now. I'm putting all that together and trying to get grants for that to do a book. And I'd like to do a book with the stuff about my brother, and that's much more abstract, and it has collage, it has different artworks, it has his writings, so it's very different.
What's the book market like these days? I mean, you have to raise a lot of money yourself, don't you? Not just to
Well,
do it, but to do the whole process, not just
right.
the pictures.
I've been fortunate that all my books were paid for by the publishers and I actually got advances.
That's a
So,
big deal.
yeah. Obviously Tyson is commercial, and I do think Powerhouse is the perfect publisher for it. It's just fits in with their type of, you know, photography. And for this one, I actually hired a publicist for After War, which also had a good market at the time, but I was so exhausted after 15 years, and the war had started, the invasion of Iraq had started, and I couldn't do more,
Yeah.
and I should have hired a publicist. I got some really good press. I had a huge exhibit at the United Nations. Actually, David Burnett and I had the exhibit together. I had gallery exhibits, I had museum exhibits, um, but I didn't push the book enough. So with Tyson, uh, you know, I do have a lot of really good stories, and a lot of the major press, especially radio, it's very hard to get photo books on the radio because you're not doing readings. But if you've got really good stories and they're interested in it, it could be great for radio. And now anybody can put pictures on the web. So I've done some podcasts. Um, I did Fox News the other day. I'm doing WCBS News next week. I did WPIX. Hopefully, I'll be doing something on MSNBC. So we're trying. It's crazy to say this, but they had some things almost happening, and the Queen died.
Right.
So it was like I had good timing just by chance because this Hulu show about Mike Tyson came out, and everybody was interested, and then the Queen died, and they were like, "Sorry, we can't do anything." And then they didn't have the Hulu peg anymore. So how do you find a peg? So now I have the Gleason's gym peg and the exhibit peg. But unless I can bring Mike Tyson with me, it's very hard to get people to do anything on major television.
So we should give some background here. When you, I mean, how old was Tyson when you first started photographing him, and how did that come about in the first place?
I was at Parsons School of Design, the new school where I now teach full time right now. And I took a photojournalism class, although I was mostly doing like documentary fine art type work. And we had to find a story and try to get it published. And I was taking pictures for the school, and I'd get to take these seminars for free. One was filmmakers on filmmaking, and I would take pictures of the guests. And then they were giving a seminar about Muhammad Ali, and they asked if I wanted to take pictures of the guests for that. And I said, sure. And one of the guests was Jim Jacobs, who was co-owner of the Big Fights, a fight film company, and they were boxing managers. And we were in the green room, and I was photographing him. And he asked if I knew who my father was. He said,
Yeah.
"Do you know who Charles Grinker is?" I said, "Yeah, he's my father." He said, "Oh, I do work with him." Because my father did television documentaries and, educational television, and he would get films from him. So when I heard about these kids upstate being trained by Customato, I thought that's a great visual story to do for my photojournalism class. So I called my dad and I'm like, is this guy okay? I was in my early 20s, and he's like, yeah, sure. And so I called up Jim and I asked him first if I could go up there. And he said he'd find out about it. And then I asked my dad if the guy was okay. And then I started going up, and I was interested in Billy Ham, who was a 9-year old Caucasian kid with muscles. And that's who I did my story on. And I sold it to Inside Sports during class. So that was the goal, was to get your work published. Now, of course, it's much easier to get published because you can publish yourself. But then it was a big challenge. So I did it. And I also did a story on Nadia, one girl up there. And she's actually still up there in Catskill doing boxing training. And nobody was interested in a female boxer. She was a Mormon. She had pet rats. The missionaries were coming up. I mean, it was great visually. But they were a boxing club that would go to different boxing gyms around the state and fight with other clubs. And so Mike was there all the time. They were in the gym training all the time. Some of the kids lived in the house on the weekend, and a few of them lived there full time. Mike was one that lived there full time. Billy would come on the weekends. Nadia lived in town, so she was never at the house. Um, and I would just go up and stay on weekends and take pictures. And then
Tyson was like what, 14, 13 at the time?
14. Yeah.
14. And how soon did it take you to realize that this was somebody you should follow and really pay attention to?
I love that question. Um, I, Customato said to me, you should be photographing Mike. Here's a picture. This is the cover of Chronogram magazine, which is a big publication up here in the Hudson Valley. This is one of Mike's first professional fights. And he was a big kid. He was like 18 then. But for me, he looked normal for a boxer. But the 9-year-old with muscles was an anomaly, and a female was an anomaly. So that's why I wanted to focus on them. But I was up there photographing, and then they asked me to photograph some of their other fighters who were professionals. And, I sold the story, and I started taking my work to Sports Illustrated. So while I was trying to become professional, Mike was becoming professional, and I started being hired to photograph him. So I was there, and things were happening all the time. So I was always photographing it. So, I was his photographer, and I was there. So it's not like I knew this was going to happen, but everybody else knew. And because I was there, I was documenting it. And I mean, I knew in the way that I was trying to sell the story to publications, and they were like, "What do you know?" And then they realized I was the only one who had access once he did become world champion. But I was proposing stories beforehand to the Village Voice, to different sports magazines. And so it was just being in the right place at the right time and persevering with the young boxers.
So that first fight, the one that's on the cover of that magazine, how old was he there? What, 16, 17,
No, 18, because he was pro.
18? So he had to
Just
wait till he was 18, right?
Yeah. And so, he did Junior Olympics and other things, but I wasn't around for any of that. But this was one of his first fights. It was my first fight, and it lasted like 30 seconds. And I got a great shot of the punch. So that was exciting.
I mean, that was kind of the challenge, shooting a Mike Tyson fight. They didn't last that long normally.
Well, you know sports, and you photograph sports, and you understand probably better than anybody that to really be a good sports photographer, you have to understand the game. You have to understand how players think. You have to anticipate what's coming. And I knew nothing about the sport. And when you're around, and I was thrown into the world heavyweight fight in Las Vegas with a lot of great photographers, great sports photographers. I was the only female. I was very young, and I didn't know much about shooting boxing. And you're so crowded around the ring. You're like arm to arm to people. You could barely move your arm to change your film. And when you're shooting a fight and you're changing film, and somebody like me had two cameras, they probably have like five cameras, but you have an assistant behind you. So I would just bring somebody with me, and you have to get your camera back to them. But if you don't understand what's happening, you could so easily miss things.
Right.
So I don't think I ever, except for that very first one that I photographed, I'm not sure I ever made a great shot in the ring. I have some good ones, but
What
there's
year?
like
What year was that title fight? How old was he?
86,
How old? What?
18. I think it was 18.
So he
Um,
had a title fight almost immediately, and you were part of the entourage. You had unique access, which is
mhm.
more valuable than any of the action pictures, anyways. And that's really what your book is this privileged access
Yeah,
behind the scenes.
that fight, Howard Cosell was there, and all these major photographers, as I said, and I was able to go into the ring
Right.
and go back to his room after, and there was a little party with balloons and soda. And I got him staring in the mirror looking at his belt, and he was amazed, and calling Camille, the woman who was living with Cuss in the house, who was like his surrogate mother, as Cuss was like his surrogate father. We could show some pages from the book, and on I could share my screen if you want to.
Absolutely. I'm going to put a slideshow up. Uh, Jeff, your agent, sent me some images to
I
to
think he's
use.
your agent.
Well, he's our agent. How old were you when you started working with contact press images?
You know what? I don't remember. Well, I could figure it out. My birthday's on Sunday, so um, it was 1989,
Okay.
and this is what happened. I I was with an agency called Visions. It was Ethan Hoffman and Jeff Jacobson
Sure,
and
yeah,
a bunch of people that had kind of left Magnum. And I couldn't they had I couldn't handle like the volume once Tyson started going pro. And so I went to Duomo, the sports agency. And then I just wanted to combine everything. And I met Robert Pledge at Contact, and he saw these. I had just photographed, I guess it was, yeah, it was like 88. And I had just photographed Mike and Robin after they got married, Mike and Robin Givens. And Robert Pledge looked up at these slides. He's like, oh, we must have these. And that's how I started with Contact.
so where was the office at that point? Was that on Central Park West?
No, no, it was on 28th Street.
Okay, so it was 28th Street. And kind of share what was a day in the life of Contact Press Images at that point?
Hmm.
Were
Well,
you
I
were you a
think,
little overwhelmed, or were you, I mean, because it was chaotic, right, to say the least.
yeah, I think for me, like with archive, you would shoot something and you would pay to have everything duplicated
Right.
and they would distribute, but it was more hands-on. And with Duomo, you just sent them the stuff and they did everything. And with Contact, you gave them stuff and they did everything and they packaged it and tried to sell it. But for me, I was so busy shooting, so I would be giving them the pictures. And, for me, taking good notes and doing good captions was a real challenge. I was terrible at it. And it was just about getting your work in on time. And I also started traveling around the world doing assignments. So in some of these countries you didn't have any way to ship other than getting what we called a pigeon, somebody that you would trust who would bring your film back. I remember being in Cambodia where I spent a lot of time in 89, 90, 91, and you'd to make a phone call, you'd have to like go to the little phone place and tell them where you want to call, and then they'd say come back in 3 hours. They would keep trying to get
Right.
through, and either you'd go back to your room or and then you'd get on the phone and then you try to arrange everything. So I remember more about being on assignment and getting pictures to them and them having editors go through your work and make the selects and sending them out to magazines and sending them out to sister agencies around the world and trying to sell the stories. And going in there, I don't know, it was, what I liked about it was that it was a family and
It was
seeing
a
you
family.
and seeing other photographers and that was great. And I think a lot of the agencies now are like that. They're cooperatives and they meet once a year or twice a year, whatever it is. And I think they have that makeup, but it's all paid for by each person. So
Right.
that's the difference. It's cooperative.
What was the learning curve like for you? I mean, you're at Parsons, a fashion type of school, and suddenly you were a journalist with this privileged access to uh, a worldwide, personality. What what was your growth like? How did you have to adapt, and how quickly did that happen?
Um, well, technically, I had to learn how to use Flash, and if I had ideas of how to do portraits, I had to literally learn how to light it. I wanted to be an illustrator, and I started in a communication design program there. And once I started doing the Tyson stuff and working, I didn't go to school anymore. So I was working.
No, I
And
noticed. I looked through the book this morning, and that was something I noticed, that you had to go from uh, purely like journalistic to stylized portraits, like in the blink of an eye. that happened real quick.
Yeah, and I would see old boxing photographs. I did these I did these prints for Ring magazine. Like I had all these funny little jobs and I Ring magazine would sell prints of portraits of boxers from throughout history. And they were all from 8 by 10 negatives and I lived in a tiny little studio apartment and you walked in and there was this tiny entryway that was like the kitchenette and there was a bathroom off of that, so I put up a plywood like table bench thing on chains and I would bring it down. I'd put my developing trays on that. You couldn't open the door if that was down. And then the bathtub was where I washed everything. And I would leave all these prints for the last minute. I probably made like 25 cents a print or 50 cents a print. They probably sold them for like $1 each. And I'd have all, I wish I had a picture of it. I had all these boxers hanging around my apartment on clotheslines. It was a studio apartment, so it was really funny. But
So
I
that's
liked some of
something
these.
we should talk about. I mean, you're doing you're doing this work, but your process, all the Tyson work, you probably processed most of that yourself and printed it as well, right? Or
In the
how did that
beginning,
happen? Yeah,
in the beginning, but once I started getting assignments, we sent it out. But the first several years, I was doing it all. And but the thing about the boxing portraits was that I would see these poses, and I wanted to do that with Mike.
right.
Or I would see the way shadows hit a wall in the gym, and I wanted to make that a photograph with that kind of thing. So I just would figure out what kind of lights to use and ask the photo rental places and the studio rentals and rent them and go up there and light it. I really didn't, it's like I wasn't in school anymore and I didn't study any of that. I didn't take any photography like that and I didn't take any journalism classes except for that one. And um, I started shooting color. At Contact, I had to start shooting slide film. I switched from Nikon to Canon because we were sponsored by Canon, and everything was reverse. So I remember I was working in Cambodia, photographing the prime minister and doing these assignments, and everything would be underexposed because I was turning my knobs the wrong way. So I was learning a lot on the job. And um, I mean, I knew very little about the exposure triangle or, flash. I learned in that one class, and that was super helpful. And I had a really natural eye. I was much better at photography than at art. I was much better at composing a photograph than I was at figuring out my compositions of drawings and paintings. So it would just that rectangle and being able to respond to the stimuli in front of me and frame it was just the right combination for me rather than, and I could draw on everything, but there I had it in front of me and I could figure out where it goes.
So that's important because when you look at your work, and what I'm trying to get at here is you didn't have a lot of time to learn the right ways to do things. And do you think that was an advantage? Because when you look at your work, we're looking at work that's, what is it, 40 years ago now, 35 years ago, whatever it is.
No, it's 40 years ago.
Right. It's very intuitive. It's very natural. The composition
Hmm.
is it's not traditional. It's how you see. And
Hmm.
I'm wondering, could that have been schooled out of you if you would have stuck around Parsons too long?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I started doing assignments for magazines like Newsweek, Time, all these others, not necessarily Tyson assignments, I had a great assignment for Newsweek once to photograph the train trip in 3 days, which was, a lot of time for that because the writer had to do it quicker, but from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City then. And it was fantastic. I mean, it was just such a creative assignment. And editors were like, I'm sorry, we can't use your more creative work. So
Right.
they wanted, I think now it's much different. I think they want more creative work now, most magazines. Um, but
There's almost like a secret template back then of what was acceptable and what somehow crossed that line of uh, this is acceptable magazine photography and this is art photography.
mhm, yeah, and now I think, especially with places like the New York Times Magazine, they really try to mix it up, and I think that's really important. I think there's a real if I mean, you don't want to read articles that don't have some creative parts to them. You know, it's not like a teletype, story of what just happened, word for word, a man walked down the street and got shot. It's more prose, and photography is the same. There has to be some poetry in it. And somebody once asked me, I was teaching a workshop in Bangladesh, and he said, how important is composition? How important is like the graphics of it? And I'm like, it's very important. But I think maybe then for journalism, you weren't supposed to think that was important. I don't know. But if you look at all the great photojournalists, they all have that, right?
Yeah, I mean they wouldn't be great if they didn't.
Exactly. So it's intuitive, and it's inherent, and some people have that eye and some people don't. You know, I teach photography at the New School and at NYU, and I've taught at ICP. And when a place is really a photo school, you do have more people who've put portfolios together to get into the school. When you're taking an elective in a journalism program at NYU or at the New School, I do get some Parsons students, but you get some people who've never done photography, and some of them really excel, and some of them just don't have the eye. They try really hard, they're learning everything, and they might be great writers. I'm not a great writer. I'm a okay writer. I'm not bad, but it's not so easy for me. Photography was so easy for me. So we all have our talents, I guess.
What so you say you have stories. I know you have stories. What was it like traveling in that entourage? How did you fly commercial? Did you fly private? Did you
Oh, never private.
never?
Ken,
Yeah,
my computer's not plugged in and it hasn't been all day, and my low battery thing just came up. Can we take a pause?
sure.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay, so you never flew private. You always flew commercial. That's a bit of a drag being a being that everybody I think flies private now in the boxing world or the AM the fighting world in general.
Yeah, my picture is crooked. It's driving me crazy. Um, when I went to Japan, Mike was training for the Tony Tubbs fight, and he had just gotten married, and I was only hired to shoot the training. I couldn't stay for the fight. I mean, I wasn't hired to stay for the fight, and they flew me business class. Mike was in first class, and so it was like first class, upstairs. So I would go upstairs and take pictures of him. He was sleeping on the floor because he was more comfortable to stretch out his legs. And they didn't want me up there photographing. So he came down to business class and sat with me. So at least I was in business class. And he would send me food, and I would send him my food. And You'll see a picture in the book where you see his gold teeth. That's because we were sitting next to each other on the plane and we are just talking, and I'm just like in his face taking pictures. Um, so I didn't fly private, but business class was pretty great for
It's not
me,
bad. It's not bad. That's for sure.
especially going to Japan.
Yeah. What
But
was that?
the flights to Las Vegas, sometimes I went on my own and then got hired there.
So
What?
when you were in Vegas, you're staying at a big. What? Where'd you stay where were the Caesars? Was that where the fights were?
Yeah, we would stay at Caesars, but there were times where I went on my own,
Right.
and I would just stay in a motel on the strip, and everybody else would, because I wasn't hired, but I still wanted to be there photographing. So there was a lot that I did on my own.
What was your budget? What was your budget for gambling, according to Mike Tyson?
um, I didn't gamble, but there was one night. This might have been in Atlantic City at Trump Plaza where Mike gave us all money and like $200 each.
What?
And of course, I
Come
wanted to
on.
keep the money.
It was more
I,
than 200,
I was
Lori.
broke. It was not. So we all had to gamble, and we lost the money. But that was my one time gambling with Mike and Entourage.
Okay. What other perks? What there had to be more perks. Tell us about
In
Robin
Japan, there
Givens.
was lots of sushi.
Oh, that's a good perk.
Platters and platters of sushi. And of course, you're there photographing and you're not part of what they're doing, eating. You're photographing. And I'm like, and they're leaving all this sushi. So I would be like, let me take some back to my room. And um, what perks were there? I think the access was the perk.
Yeah, that's a perk. That's the greatest perk. But
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever have to like drop Mike Tyson's name to like, I don't know, do something? Come on.
No, it took me 2 years to get Mike to take me with him to Brownsville, where he had been born and had all his trouble, because he just didn't want to do it. He never let me go to the big parties, the really big parties with all the celebrities, because he didn't
Really?
want me to see what was going on there. I could go right up till he was leaving, and then no. In hindsight, I understand why he didn't want me there. I'm sure there was lots of drugs and girls and things he didn't want photographed. Um, in Japan, people did stories on us. I think he would say I was his cousin or something, and everybody was wondering why this white girl, this white American girl, could go where no other all the Japanese photographers had to stay behind a velvet rope, and only the boxing promoter, the Japanese boxing promoter's photographer, and I could go past that rope. Only I could go into the ring after championship fights. So
Okay. So speaking of championship fights, how'd it go with Robin Givens? Was she nice? Was she sweet?
she was sweet in the beginning. She and her mother were very sweet, and they seemed Robin and Mike seemed very much in love, and it was very much Robin, Ruth, and Mike, very, very much. I mean,
Right, right.
it was a trio. I mean, there was never a time. Well, Ruth wasn't in Japan with us, but she was there at the airport when Robin and I flew back together. And Ruth was at the airport, and Ruth said, "We'll give you a ride in the limousine back to Manhattan if you come with us to look at this house in Bernardsville, New Jersey." And it's a long flight from Tokyo. You're very tired, but you don't say no because you want to make pictures. So we go there, and I'm taking pictures of Robin in all the rooms of the house and all this stuff, and then they drive me back. And that night, Mike calls me from Japan, and he's like, "So, Lori, what'd you think of the house?" And of course, it was a great house. So I said it was a great house. So then Robin bought the house, and that's when like she started siphoning his money. But they used me, they used everybody, and they threatened me. One, I was photographing for People magazine, and I had done these portraits on my own of Mike and Robin, and they were going to use them on the cover. And Sports Illustrated used one on the cover, and Life had just done a story on them. I don't remember who shot it. It could have been Ken Reagan. It could have been, I know, yeah, I don't know who it was, but they knew I was also doing this story. And one night, Ruth Roper, Robin's mother, calls me, and she's like, if your pictures come out in People before the Life magazine story comes
Oh,
out, we'll
geez.
make sure you never work in this town again, word for
Oh,
word.
geez.
And she was scary, and I was shaking. But then I was like, they're the same company, and I have no say, and they work with each other, and it was like it was just ridiculous
That would
and
have,
stressful.
yeah, that's when things get hard with the access game, right? Because at some point it does turn stressful and it becomes less fun.
Exactly. The fun starts to go away. But we were in Atlantic City, and Robin was supposedly pregnant, and Ruth was on the phone all day that day, and suddenly a wheelchair comes in, and Robin's taken out on a wheelchair and out on the boardwalk with the wheelchair with the little Yorkshire Terrier and in one arm of Ruth's, and Mike's pushing the wheelchair. So I think they wanted all this documented.
Yeah,
I
this
don't
was for
believe
the,
any of
yeah,
it,
yeah,
frankly.
that was planned for sure.
Yeah. And I was shooting in a dark hotel room at like with like pushed film, and I go outside to the bright sun and I forget to change my film, but it was all right. We've all done that, right?
Yeah, yeah, we've done that. We've done that with Kodachrome. You know how
Yeah.
hard it is to have Kodachrome pulled in processing? Kodak didn't like to do that. It was almost impossible.
Yeah.
But I had to do it once. It was like $200 a roll to get that done.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's no fun. What else you gonna do?
Right.
Um, the the thing with Tyson and these images in the book, and like I said, I looked through the book this morning. 40 years, and these were good pictures when you made them, but you tack on 40 years, and all of a sudden they're priceless, they're timeless, they're they're true history that would have gone
Mhm.
completely unseen, unrecorded without you being there. Is that something that you have thought about, or that you? I, I mean, it's important work, right?
Well, when I look at it and I see the breadth of what I did, it's kind of amazing to me, and I do think there's a lot of really good pictures. There's a, we when we first started designing the book, we went over like 100 pages, and they're like, your contract says 100 pages, you have 250, so get it down to 150 or something. So a lot of pictures of Trump went out. Um,
There's only
and
one, I think, or maybe two at this point.
there's two or three.
Yeah.
Um, and Yeah, it's a period of history, and I think it's really important. And he is this major celebrity, but he also did a lot of bad things, and some people, it's like people are fascinated by him or repelled by him. So the people who are repelled are not going to bring a book of Mike Tyson pictures into their home. People who are fans are really excited about it. And then there's the photography world. And I think some people don't want to look at it the way you just talked about it. They don't want to look at it as these photographs that would, documented something that would have gone undocumented. The photographs are interesting compositionally, and historically, and that's the thing I'm wondering if there'll be response to in terms of it as photographs, as a photography book, as opposed to a sports book and a book about a personality. And we'll see. It's new.
I
Um,
don't think it's a sports book. I mean, there's sports, there's action photos in there, but I don't see it as a sports book.
I don't see it as a sports book either, but when it sells, it goes up on that list on Amazon, which is not really, you know, that
Right.
meaningful, but it could be like number 10 in sports photography, where it's not, it's definitely not. I mean, the amount of pictures in the ring is like minuscule compared to the rest of the book.
There was one picture, and this is really inside baseball, inside boxing, whatever you want to call it. There's an overhead shot you made of a fight somewhere, and it's I forget who was the sponsor of that fight, but it was very interesting to me because
Pepsi?
it was Pepsi, and it was the
Yeah,
blue Pepsi
yeah,
ring, right? And so, like I said, this is inside baseball, but before before a certain time, say 1970, 1975, something like that, the boxing rings, they were white. The floor of the boxing room, there was no advertising, and it's an interesting leap because when you look at that blue ring from overhead with the Pepsi logo, it's almost subtle today compared to, you look at an octagon and there's advertising over every square inch of that.
yeah, yeah.
And so when I think about your pictures, not that there's a historical document in that too, but there's also this I have this feeling that if you had a young fighter today fighting his first professional bout when he's 18, fighting for a world championship less than a year later, um, I think there I think there would have been publicists. I think there would have been a PR team. There would have been contracts involved, and I think it'd be very hard to get that same type of unscripted, raw feel that you captured.
Well, I guess, well, that was the very beginning. Okay. So I was inside and I was working for the big fights who were his manager. And I was able to go almost everywhere, not everywhere. Other photographers were sent to do assignments for Sports Illustrated and Life and Vanity Fair, Annie Leibovitz and Ken Reagan, and, a host of others. But in the very beginning, I started getting assignments from everybody around the world because I had that access. And, I don't know if any boxers are with some huge production. I'm sure they had, the publicity is easy because he's the world champion. Um, because of if Don King was there in the beginning, would I have kept that access? Probably not, you know?
I was thinking about this last night. Have you seen that new Elvis film by
Not
the
yet. I really want to see that.
okay. So there's always a Colonel Tom Parker. There's always a Don King lurking about in the shadows. And I see that Elvis story. It's kind of echoed to some degree in the Tyson story. Mike had his other demons, that were,
Mhm.
on his tail, but he didn't get much help from like you said, like the Givens clan, the Don Kings. I don't know, what Trump's involvement, but it didn't seem like he got a lot of outside of his first manager. It didn't seem like he got a lot of good advice or help in that regard.
Right, because um, well, Don King's notorious for stealing his fighters' money. And Mike knew that. And Mike told me he would never sign with Don King. And a few days later, he was signed with Don King.
Right.
This is when so Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton were the co-managers. Bill Caton was a very difficult person, and I don't think Mike liked him. Okay. Jim Jacobs was super nice and accessible. Bill was more the businessman. Jim was a handball champion of the United States. He was an athlete, and he understood it from that point of view. And he was a businessman, and he was an incredible comic book collector. So he was this really quirky guy,
Right.
and and he and Cust were roommates for a while, and then somebody brought Mike to Cust. Jim was supporting that house in Catskill. Um, and it was a family, and they were good people. And then, of course, Cust died, and then Jim died. So, he definitely wasn't going to stay with Bill Caton. There was no way. And who else was out there? There was Bob Arum, and there was Don King. And Don King was already, he was always around because he was a promoter. So he was
Right.
always around in Vegas and in Atlantic City. Trump was always around, but he wasn't managing fights. He just had the hotels. And when Jim Jacobs died, we went out to LA for the funeral, and Mike and I were talking, and I had done some work for Don King. And I said, he never paid me. And Mike took me to Don King's apartment and made Don King write me a check. It was like $400 or something. And we left the apartment, and in the hallway, waiting for the elevator, he said, "I will never sign with Don King." And then literally 3 days later, he signed with him. And he signed, I believe, he signed something that said he didn't own the right to his image anymore.
Oh, geez.
So
Yikes.
Don King had control of that for advertising and stuff.
Which is where the real money probably was.
Yeah, and Ruth and Robin came around, and suddenly Ruth was there constantly managing things, and then Don King was there all the time, and they were best friends. So they were planning. You could see them planning. I mean, I feel like I was on the inside of this opera, and you could see it being built, and all the characters coming in, and the whole thing being written, and these things were bound to happen. And
Right.
Mike already had his demons. So, Jim and Bill certainly had money in mind. They were businessmen, but I do think they had Mike set up pretty well with investments and things like that. And the minute Jim died and he left Bill, or he was with Robin, he got rid of all of that, he
Oh, geez.
divested. So he lost everything.
Yeah, it's like it's a cliche at this point. It's so terrible. Well,
And what I see in my book, and what I like about my book, and that's what I hope people will take away, is this story. It's a story. It's like a novel, you know. Young kid comes out of a prison reformatory, upstate New York, meets this old boxing trainer. They become like father and son. They help each other. Cuss, is living for this, and the whole thing. It's like, this kid with this lisp, you
right.
know, and this incredible size for a young guy. And, there's all the visuals, there's all the psychological stuff, there's all the heartache and hard stories of his life and his mother. And, you know, um,
No, you're right. It is a novel. It's a classic story. The love and generosity that strangers and become family, and they literally conquer the world in some regards.
like, I wonder if Mike wasn't famous, if people would look at my book differently, if they would see it for that story, that kind of story of a boxer. I don't know. You know,
Well, I mean, the sad truth might be that you know, if he wasn't famous, nobody would see your work. I mean, we're kind of as it's kind of a catch 22, right? I mean, the 9-year old with the muscles, if you tried to get a book published of him today, would anybody call you back?
I don't know, because if you think about when I started, people were interested in those pictures, but they weren't anybody who was famous,
Right.
right? So what, I mean, people have done boxing photographs of boxers forever, right?
What's the how many books did they print in the first run?
4,500.
Okay. So that's a good number.
Mhm. For
Probably
a photo book, yeah.
for photo book, it's probably twice the average. I think
Hmm.
they'll probably go to a second printing pretty quick here.
We'll
If I had
see.
to, if I, fingers
From your
crossed.
mouth, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's coming out at the right time. Um, Mike Tyson is liable to punch somebody in first class again any day now.
See, that just like flew by. He can get away with so much, which is also very interesting. That's a conversation I had with a writer the other day for a podcast for Ring Magazine, and it's like Mike keeps getting second, third chances. He keeps bouncing back. I mean, he did serve his time in prison. There is that, but and he's fucked up and a little crazy, but he's also really has a good heart. And, I look at what I see about his kids, and it seems like he's been a really good father. And, he's a stoner now. He has
He has his
his
own. He has his
cannabis
own.
business.
He has his own. What do you call it? Strain of plants. I mean,
Wow.
yeah.
And he's a really unique personality, and he's not hurting anybody anymore in the ring or out. Who knows? He might get in the ring again. Um, but somebody started talking about like all the Me Too people, Feinstein and Cosby, and all these others, and they use their power to take advantage of people. And Mike never did that.
Right.
Never. He opened his heart to everybody and let everybody in. And a lot of those people took advantage of him. You know.
No, it's I love to hear that from you because that's always the perception I had of the guy. He he was who he was, his environment, how he was, raised or not raised, but he still had a good heart, I think, and I think he was taken advantage of. And I don't begrudge a guy getting 2 or 3 or 4 second chances in that regard.
Especially if they're trying to give back. I mean, he did bad things. He knows he did bad things. He became, in my time with him, very difficult to work with, very unreliable. But he was kind of always like that. But there were times where I'd have assignments or shoots set up between me and him, and he just wouldn't show up, and I would miss other important things because of it. And that's why I stopped.
Right.
It was like I really decided I didn't want to keep photographing Mike Tyson, because at that point it was like, what for? To try to make some money? There were other stories and other projects I wanted to do, and I couldn't let this interfere with that. There was no way to do both, because you're always on hold and you're always trading favors, like, oh Lori, we need pictures for my kids or something, and okay, then you do this for me, and then you don't always get your part.
No, it's another. I mean, it's a
I
delicate
have to
balance,
fix
right?
it. Yeah.
You don't want to you don't want to be just the Mike Tyson photographer, and that's a trap
Right.
that a lot of photographers fall into, right?
Exactly.
You get on that train, then you can't get off, and when you do, nobody nobody wants to work with you anymore. So what's
The
next?
thing is, he's
Oh,
he's not he's not Muhammad Ali. So that's, if this was a book like this of Muhammad Ali, it would be in its second printing already, right? So it's just there's still all that controversy with Mike.
No, but I think it's an important conversation to have. And I think that's what, you
Mhm.
know, maybe you can't have that. You need a long form type of platform like a book to have that conversation because it's there's you can't gloss over things, but you have to. I mean, you have to look at the full person. I think.
Mhm.
Yeah. What? So you got a bunch of things scheduled. Um, what's
Yeah.
next? You got what are you working on
Next
now?
with well, as I said, I'm doing this film about my father, and I've got 4 years of footage, and there's something happening in November with him, but I'm not sure I can make it. And he's 89 now, and I'd like to wrap it up and start editing. Um, I'm putting together this work about my mom. She passed away a year and a half ago, and um, I think there's a book in it, and it's kind of a three-part thing. And we had a very difficult relationship, and when I was taking care of her those 3 months, and we would have these conversations we never had my entire life. So I recorded everything on my phone, and I have hundreds of recordings that some are transcribed, some are not. So I need to put all that together. Um, I'm not starting anything new right now. I'd really like to get back to this project about my brother, which I want to make more artwork with. And I'd really like to. I'm fixing a house. My house is from 1830, 1835, and it was renovated a little bit in 1950, and not since. So, and I don't have much money, so little by little, I'm doing stuff. So I'm up here in my attic, which is now my studio, and it's great to have space, but I need to finish that so I can really have like sections where I'm working, and I have a little room over there that's going to be my scanning room. So I really would like to start going through some of my archive, as you're doing, as a lot of us are doing now at our age. Um, because there's a lot of stuff there that would be great to print or do things with. And some of it is the very personal work I did when I was young and starting out, and some of it is journalistic work or work from projects. I mean, there's a picture of Mike that's not in the book that's going to be in my exhibit, printed 30 by 40. That's now one of my favorite images. And I don't even think I considered it for the book. But it's you find these gems, and you really need to sit with your archive and go through all that. And
What's are you going to have a dark room?
no,
No. When was the last time your place in Manhattan had a dark room?
long, long, long ago.
I mean, when was the last time you've been in a dark room? I guess is a better question.
Uh,
With your hands in deck tall, I'll
no,
clarify.
I'm thinking I had a loft in Tribeca before Tribeca was fancy, and it came with a darkroom. That's one of the reasons I took it. It was like a fifth floor walk up.
To walk up, yeah.
Um, huh?
I
You
said the
were
fifth. I've been there. I remember.
the one on Chambers Street,
Yeah.
not the one on Franklin. I don't know if you were at the
I
one on.
wasn't. I wasn't on the one in Chambers Street. It was
Right,
on
that's the one that
Franklin.
had the dark room. And so, that was in the early 80s.
So
So around
that's.
then, yeah, I
Oh
think
wow.
around then. Once I started working all the time, I started sending stuff to the labs. I gave my enlarger to somebody, and other, trays and things like that. Um, But I wouldn't mind going back into the dark room. I think it would be fun. I could make a dark room up here. I'd have to put plumbing in, but I definitely have a dark room across from me. So it's possible.
I
My
think. I think
tenant,
about it. I think about it.
oh, you
Like
haven't been either?
no. Like every 6 months, I think about. Oh, I could build a dark room. I got all the stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and then I talked myself out of it. I think it'd be, oh
Well, I have a tenant here,
yeah,
and his name is Jim McGargy, and he had a lab in New York called MV Labs,
uh-huh,
and he was Annie Leibovitz's printer forever. He still is. So I have a printer living in my basement apartment. So he printed my show, and he I just sold a couple of prints. He printed those.
nice.
Yeah,
That's the best of both worlds.
except you get much less money. You know, if I sell through my gallery or something, I have to pay for the printing. And if
Right,
you do it yourself, you kind of you have the pride of printing
right.
and the money.
But he's printing 30 by 40.
He can print 30 by 40, but what happened was the Ilford paper he was using, cool tone paper, nobody had. He had one, he didn't have enough to make a 30 by 40 print and do test strips and do test prints.
Right,
And so I started calling these labs that do that, and they also didn't have, one had enough to do one, but it's all back ordered. And so I could have bought a roll that was like 98 feet for like $800. And you don't want to have that sitting around and pay all that money and then have to pay for the print. And one of the labs offered to split it with me if I would print it with them, but I'd also have to pay for the print. So I didn't buy it. And you could order a shorter roll, but it was going to take months to get it. So we decided to do those digitally.
mm-hmm.
And my digital printer's up here in Beacon, New York, and Beacon Fine Art Printing. Rob Penner, he's great. So we matched Jim's smaller prints. So it really had to be as good as that. And if I sell them, I'll sell them as silver prints, and then we'll buy the paper.
Sure.
But it's hard to get supplies. There was
No,
warm
that's
tone. There was warm tone paper available, but it wasn't going to mix.
no, that's when I keep talking myself out of the darkroom thing because the uh, the specific materials that we had access to back in the day, you don't have that access. You have to work around what the materials you can find, and that seems to me that that's a that's not worth the hassle. I don't think
Might be. I mean,
it
you can get
might.
smaller paper.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I'd love to take classes. I don't have the time. I don't have the time for anything right now. It's crazy. I can't even
You
remember
got to
the.
go back to Parsons and finish your schooling.
Well, I went and got a master's degree, and I never had a bachelor's degree. And there's some schools who will let you in um, based on merit. So I have a master's, but I don't have a bachelor's.
I'd be happy with an honorary degree at this point.
Well, I wouldn't mind an honorary degree as well. I'd go back to school again for filmmaking. There's so much that I would love to know. I mean, I'm doing my film the same way I did Tyson. I'm shooting everything myself. I'm mostly alone doing it. I'm, stumbling through it. I've shot video before, but you know, it's hard to go from stills to video. I think it's easier to go from video to stills.
You
Because
think?
you have to move, you have to
Yeah.
you can't just sit there and shoot a moving still, it has to you have to kind of move with it and do all of that. And I think I mean, I've done all right.
You've done
I
pretty
surprised
well.
myself.
You've done pretty well for yourself, Lori. Should be proud.
No, I am, but I meant I've done all right with some of the footage I've shot. Um, and I haven't done all right with some of it. But no, we've come a long way, right? And we're still here. And
And that's the trick, isn't it? The survival part.
yeah. But
I'm
I
s-
also think, you know, there are people our age still going on assignment all the time, but I also, you know, I made a decision to teach and to try to just work on my projects and, you know, it'd be fun to go on assignments. I kind of miss it, but I'm also very kind of settled for the first time. And I think it's great to see these young people going out and starting with their careers and taking off. And I feel good about helping them do that, you know?
And that's the thing, right? I mean, because I don't want to speak for both of us, but we both learned from mentors. We both learned
Mhm.
from people inside and outside of contact, and without that, uh, I don't think we would have enjoyed the same success. People were always very generous with their knowledge,
Right.
I think.
Hmm. Absolutely. You know, we had this very competitive field in some ways, but when it came right down to it, everybody was supportive. You know, you might have been competitive if you were all in the same place and you wouldn't say, like, we'd all be in Hanoi, Vietnam, and you don't tell people what you're working on. Although the Ciclo drivers would tell everybody. You know, they were like the hairdressers. You know,
Right.
you'd get in the Ciclo in the morning, they'd be like, "Do you know what? So I just took so and so over here to this place." But when we all got together at night, or when you needed to travel with people for security, everybody's supporting each other. Nobody's trying to, you know, keep things from people. You know, it's the world of journalism. I think the people are really, well, you can't be a good journalism if you don't have empathy. And if you don't have empathy for your fellow journalists, then you shouldn't be in journalism.
No, that's for sure. Empathy is a key, especially when you're trying to make pictures that move the viewer, right? If you didn't have that empathy in the first place, how can you possibly, hope to make pictures that would move somebody else, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you, Lori. I sure enjoyed catching up with you a little bit. I'm so happy with your new book. I can't wait to get my autographed copy. And I wish I was going to be in New York next week so I could go to those events. That's going to be
I wish you were too. That
wonderful. Yeah. So
Yeah, I have to send out some invitations. See, I need somebody to help me with all this. I don't even know. I don't even have a good mailing list. So I'm gonna work on that now, actually.
okay.
It's either that or clean off my desk. I think I should do my mailing list.
I think so too.
Anyway, it's great to hang out with you.
Thanks.
Makes me miss the old days.
The old days when we could have these conversations across the light table as we're actually working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Um,
laugh a lot. We laughed a lot.
we
And
did.
that's one thing I'll say about being with Mike and crew. We laughed a lot.
And
So
that's important. That's
if
important.
you can have that in your work, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, Lori, I'm going to put up a slideshow on the Curious site, curious-society.org, and uh, I'm looking for great success for you with this book, and I'm so happy you did it.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay.